Joined by Shreveport Councilman Oliver Jenkins, who Tuesday, I don't see you get agitated very often. You were clearly agitated Tuesday regarding this Shreveport Urban Film Festival and city funding for this festival of $10,000. What is your primary issue with this funding?
Okay, Aaron, appreciate you leading in that way, because key thing is I don't have any objection to the individual, her initiative, however, she had this idea, and honestly, she said, I didn't know anything about money from the city of Shreveport, and I was told I could come ask for it. My issue is the process. We as a government entity should not be in a position where we can give money to a non-recognized organization. I mean, that seems crazy to me, but I think the first line of research or due diligence before writing a check should be, is the company or group organization registered with the Secretary of State? And then, move on from there. Are they a 501c3, what have you, and can they actually receive government funding, et cetera, et cetera? And unfortunately, in this case, she did not have a registered organization with the Secretary of State. So, that's my biggest issue. And then how we can decide in a matter of, 48 hours that we should give away $10,000, which is a significant amount of money, in my opinion, in terms of civic appropriation, with very little background provided to us.
Part of the code says public funds or property of the city shall not be donated to any for-profit organization, business, or venture. It would have been prudent, I would have thought, for whoever was helping her push this to say, you got to be nonprofit first.
Well, so there is some, in some of our, I will say, policies and procedures that to receive 501c3, to receive funds from civic appropriations, you need to be a 501c3. Historically, we have made, I don't want to say exceptions, we have other fiscal agents who are 501c3s who receive money and then are charged through a cooperative endeavor agreement to, donate those funds to the respective organization. But yes, at a minimum, given all that said, frankly, that fiscal agent should have been the one requesting the funds if that was indeed the case.
If you had a nonprofit operation like Scyport, or you had something that needed a bridge, I guess is what you might call that interim nonprofit, that's a little different, though, isn't it, than this young lady who seems to be very entrepreneurial?
Yes. Now, the other part of the objection to me is we have a very codified process to apply for civic appropriation. That process begins July or August of one year. People put in a fairly extensive application, allows us to do some, vetting due diligence, ultimately gets put before a committee in January, and then of that civic appropriation budget is allocated accordingly. And so and I honestly think that she was willing in her discussion to, yes, maybe this is too premature. We would, I'd be happy to apply next year. I thought that seemed like a reasonable approach. Unfortunately, some people had other ideas.
Your issue is not with the urban, no. that it's for African-American filmmakers, etc. But in the code, it clearly says it's unlawful, blah, 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 to provide funding for any agency which discriminates against persons by reason of race, color, sex, national origin, or religion. Is this an event that people could say this is only open to a certain ethnic group?
I try to stay out of the legal interpretation business, but let me say that what she said was that the films reviewed needed either an African-American director or producer, I believe. Not that anybody who attends the festival needed to be African-American. So whether that's,
But that's
has
not
some
your issue,
element
right?
of discrimination. I'm not sure, but I think that may be being a little bit misconstrued out in the public right now in terms of she didn't say when she spoke that, non-African Americans would not be allowed. It was really the selection of the prize. So
I have a little bit of an issue in that only 2 of the films were actually filmed locally. I mean, if you're going to, the whole purpose of providing funding is to spark interest in economic development and generate some buzz here in town, and only 2 of the films are made locally. Is that accurate?
that is what she said. Yes, I think that, and I hate to pit one film festival against another, because I'm not in the film business, and I'm all for whatever is going to, be to the benefit of this community. But yes, certainly the distinguishing feature that the Film Prize has from an economic development standpoint is their point is every film needs to be filmed in, I believe, Shreveport or Northwest Louisiana. That was not one of the criteria in this Women's Film Prize. That being said, if you bring in, hundreds or thousands of people for a film weekend, there's economic development there. She admittedly said that this is kind of her first year, and, she was hoping to have a good audience, but she didn't necessarily suggest she was going to have 1,000 people from out of town come in. So,
talking to Councilman Oliver Jenkins, you said something during the meeting the other day, and I don't have a life, so I was watching. You said, during my 7 years on this council, none of us have gone to jail. This worries you that this may, in fact, be illegal. That's what it sounded like you were saying. Was I listening to the right guy?
Well, let me say, I probably should have phrased it differently. But in essence, the question is, what as stewards of public funds, what is it our responsibility to make sure that those funds are used lawfully and accounted for? And that, in this case, since we weren't, we were actually providing these funds to an intermediary or potentially an intermediary, I had some, significant concern about what the liability for us as a council or as a government agency to have we done our checks and balances to ensure the funds would be expended properly. And, once again, I've never been involved, I said this clearly, with an organization that in the matter of 48 hours, who had never heard of the requesting organization, turn around and dole out, $10,000 10 days before the event. I mean, I think that's very much atypical, unusual, whether public or private body.
If you were a betting man, do you think this is going to happen? Is she going to get the money?
I really don't know. I think that somebody who is a fiscal agent, is going to need to do some due diligence because they're taking the liability on it. And I'm a certain level of concern, if I was a fiscal agent, that I have an adequate amount of time to make sure, understand what the $10,000 is going to, how is it going to be paid to, who's writing checks, am I taking receipts from an individual and just paying that individual? There's a lot more to it at this point. I don't know. I think there's a chance, but, for the sake of everybody, including her, I'd rather see her just apply next year as part of the process.
Would you ask the mayor to veto this? Have you thought about it?
So that's a good question. I'm not sure if the mayor can veto it. So I'm not 100% sure how this is written, because the funds are already in this particular bucket. So the funds have already been allocated. That's why it's a one reader. Can the mayor veto it? I'm assuming she can. Obviously if she vetoes it, the opportunity for the council to try to override the veto is really not there, in the sense that the date of our next council meeting would be so close to the festival that, she would never be able to receive the funds. So, don't know.
Gotcha. Oliver Jenkins, Shreveport City Council member. Thanks for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Okay, you take care.
You bet.